I welcome all the members of the audience. Allow me to share my screen. Yeah, this is the topic as I mentioned just now, and we have Mr.L.V. Navaneeth already joining us. Welcome, sir, once again. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak in our webinar.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is mine.
Thank you. So the agenda is very simple. The first 30 minutes, we will request Mr. Navaneeth to deliver his talk on the topic. And the next 30 minutes, we will dedicate to the question and answers moderated by Professor R. Prasad and a few questions by myself. So this is Mr. L.V. Navaneeth. He's the CEO of the Hindu Publishing Group, and in a minute or two on his profile briefly. Mr. Navaneeth, this is his second stint. He started his career in advertising and marketing. He worked in the Hindu between 1998 and 2006. That is soon after finishing his MBA from MICA. He worked in radio, broadcasting, and media planning and buying agencies. He has over 2 decades of experience in the media sector across areas of general management, marketing, sales, distribution, programming, and content creation, and media planning and investment. That's a huge experience, and you are a noted media leader in the country. And with this introduction, I welcome you once again, Mr. Navaneeth, to initiate the talk scheduled for today. Thank you very much, and over to Mr. Navaneeth.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Mr. Professor Prasad, Mr. Sudhakar Rao. Thanks for having me here. I have noticed the profile of speakers you get for this webinar series. In fact, I trouble Mr. Sudhakar Rao to send me an invite whenever I have. And last week, I listened into Mr. Harish Bhatt and look forward to listening to Ms. Vinita Bali next week. So we have titled this presentation, Building and Communicating a Public Image, Strategies for Working Professionals. These are not, what I have to present over the next 30 minutes are not necessarily strategies, but I will try and share some insights and some directions of what has worked for me in my career so far, as far as building a public image is concerned. I also tried to approach this from an intersection of an academician and a practitioner's point of view. I have a view of this subject. I sort of practice it, but I don't practice it deeply. So hopefully what I'll leave you all with is a sweet spot of an academician and a practitioner's point of view. But the first question really is, why do we need a public image? And to management students, this question is very similar to, why do we need to build a brand? Why do we need to communicate a brand image? The answers are very similar. One could have any number of charts to justify why one needs a public image, why one needs to build and communicate it. But the short answer really is that a good and relevant public image helps maximize efforts and results in a greater impact. That is the long and short of why one needs a public image. So if public image needs to translate efforts into better impact, it's important to look at what is impact. In my view, impact is a mix of vision and influence. I tend to read a lot. I try to read a lot of books, but the books that really inspire me are our own epics. And to draw a parallel from the Mahabharata, which is one of the greatest stories written, if we had to look at the Kurukshetra war, and Kurukshetra is really the centerpiece of the Mahabharata. Out of Kurukshetra comes the Bhagavad Gita itself. But if you look at the Kurukshetra, in Vyasa's Mahabharata, Kurukshetra is a narration of what is happening on the battlefield by Sanjaya to Dhritarashtra. Now, Sanjaya is seated next to Dhritarashtra in Hastinapura, and the war is happening far away. But what Sanjaya had, he had infinite vision. He could sit in a palace and visualize what was happening on the battlefield, and he could describe this to Dhritarashtra. But Sanjaya was a charioteer, and he had zero influence. He was the lowest order of pecking order in society then. So here is a man of infinite influence and infinite vision, but zero influence. And he's narrating the goings on of the war to Dhritarashtra, was a man of zero vision, but he had infinite influence. Dhritarashtra was blind, couldn't see, but he was the leader of the Kuru Empire. He had infinite influence. But if you look at this war, Sanjaya could see what was happening. He could predict the outcomes of the war, but he had no influence to stop the war. Dhritarashtra was not just literally blind. He was blinded by his love for his children. He was blinded between what was right and wrong. So a man of infinite influence, because he had no vision, couldn't stop the Kurukshetra war. To my mind, this is a beautiful example of what public image is about, what brand image is about. And this falls into three categories. To create impact, one needs purpose. Purpose really drives vision. Uh, One needs ability, because you need to have an ability to create influence. And ultimately, one needs to have character, because character is what builds ability and it lands the purpose. So if impact is vision and influence, if this is character and purpose, character, ability, and purpose, let's see how this applies to public image. I would submit that communicating public image is only one aspect, but you can only communicate what you cultivate. If you cultivate something good that can be communicated. So I would look at public image as character, ability, and purpose. And a good test of any of these frameworks, for want of a better word, is to apply this and see how it works. If I were to apply character, ability, and purpose to ICFAI Group's mission, which I read off the website and what I also gathered from what I hear about the work that ICFAI does, the character of ICFAI Group really is to have a world-class aspiration, to be innovative both in terms of pedagogy and innovative use of technology. This results into an ability to create skilled and ethical professionals. Very few people focus on ethics. So I'm delighted here's an institute that believes ethics is very important. So the ability of ICFAI Group is to create skilled and ethical professionals, but the real purpose is to build the nation, to give the nation resources that can build them. So the framework of character, ability, and purpose beautifully fits into what ICFAI is trying to do. But this is at an organization level. When I spoke with Mr. Sudhakar Rao, he suggested that I share some thoughts of how this applies to working professionals. So let's look at public image from an individual point of view. Image really is perception, and image is what the publics that matter to us think about us. So if I were to look at two ends of public image from an individual point of view, there's a self-image and there's a public image. Self-image of a character is the kind of person I am, but the public image is how others describe me as. Now, if there's no consistency between what I think of myself and what others describe me as, there is a problem. These need to be as close to each other. Ability is what I am good at, but the public image of ability or the public perception is what others depend on me for. Purpose is what I believe is my contribution. Public image of purpose is what others value me for. But to do this well, one needs consistency, credibility, and clarity. One needs consistency of character, credibility through ability, and clarity of purpose to really build a public image and communicate public image so that it multiplies the efforts we put in for better outcomes. But my sense always has been that everything starts with purpose. While character and ability are important, everything starts with purpose. I would like to share an incident that has shaped me deeply, and this was when I was young. I'm a native of Andhra, born and brought up in Karnataka. My mother tongue is Tamil. Tata means grandfather in all these three languages. This is a story or an incident about my grandfather, who used to live in a small village in Andhra called Vikota. I was studying in Karnataka in a town called Chintamani, and every summer I used to look forward to going to my village and spending time with my grandfather and cousins. And we had a fairly large house in our village. People familiar with old houses will relate to a 3x3 structure. So you had 3 rooms on the left, 3 rooms in the middle, 3 rooms on the right. Then you had a courtyard, a kitchen and a bathroom, and then you had a backyard for cattle and food grain storage, etc. That was the kind of house my tata had. He was a doctor by profession. 1/3 of this house, which is the 3 rooms on the right, were earmarked for his practice. So when I used to go to my village, I used to love spending time with my grandfather and hanging around with him. At that time, he was fairly old, and this is an incident from 1985. I was in my 7th standard, and my grandfather was nearing 80 at that time, and he was very hard of hearing. He had a hearing aid, but the family had sort of figured out how to talk to him so that he understands what we speak. So we used to assist him in his clinic. Lots of people used to come to him. So we were in a small village surrounded by even smaller villages. So patients from 50 to 60 kilometers away used to come and seek help and advice and treatment from my grandfather. There were times when they would miss a bus and stay back in the house, get fed and go back. So when I used to assist my grandfather, I noticed something very peculiar about how he used to run his practice. He used to wear a long white coat. People familiar with old Telugu, Tamil movies would have seen doctors with these white coats. And this coat had two pockets on the left and right, which are fairly deep. Now the patients used to come and used to treat them, and typically the patient would ask at the end of the treatment before he or she leaves, doctor, how much do I pay for you? And remember, this is 85, this is in a village setting, there were no rate cards saying consultation fees, so much, so on. And my grandfather used to tell me, tell them you pay whatever you want and drop the money in my left pocket. But then people used to say, but I got 5 rupees in my hand, I need change. He used to say, take the change from the right pocket. So people used to put money into his left pocket, sometimes go away, sometimes take money from his right pocket. It used to amaze me why he used to do this. And I asked him, why do you do this? So his insight into this was, he said, look, I'm no doubt a good doctor, but a lot of these people come to me because I'm the only doctor available to them in a 60-kilometer radius. And the people who come to me are farmers. They grow produce for us, they grow produce for the country. Their lives are full of ups and downs. Now, when they come to me, I know that very often they don't have money to pay me. Some of them just put their hand into my pocket without any money. But they know that I don't know that they have an inability to pay. So which doesn't upset them, which protects their dignity. And so long as their dignity is protected, whenever they fall sick, they will come to me. If I charge them money or ask them to pay money and they're unable to do so, they will postpone coming to me and their health will suffer. If their health suffers, the health of produce suffers. If the health of produce suffers, our country suffers. Which I thought was a great way to have a purpose in life and to practice this purpose. This is an incident that has stayed me with life, and I always tell myself, one of my purposes in life is to be a grandson worthy of my grandfather. So if I had to break this down, my grandfather's purpose really was nation's welfare. His ability was farmers' well-being. He happened to be a doctor and he solved for this. But he was rooted to his purpose, whether he was a lawyer, an engineer, whatever he was, he would have found a way to service this purpose. And his character was of protecting others' dignity. And how did this translate in terms of perception? People used to come to him, recognize that he put service over self, that his ability was to be a guardian of wellness, not just treat people. And they found him to be kind and charitable. So my submission is, while character, ability, and purpose are important, everything starts with purpose. So I thought I'll share this deeply personal story with all of you. Now, if everything starts with clarity, now I try to put a framework around building and communicating a public image. My submission is, things start with clarity. One needs to have clarity of purpose and core values. One needs to have credibility, and credibility comes from attitude and skills. And one needs to consistently demonstrate. Demonstration and consistency comes through action. The first two circles, which are clarity and credibility, is all about building an image. Action and consistency is about communicating an image in public. So let's see how each of this. If we start with clarity, the biggest problem all of us challenge is this search of purpose. And I think at whatever age we are, whatever stage of life we are in, it's an ongoing journey. We struggle to find real purpose, and lack of purpose causes discomfort. While there are no specific answers to this, I thought I will share what has worked for me in seeking purpose and core values and being comfortable with this. So I've titled this Comfort. To realize one's purpose, it's a good thing to care for things, care for people, and give time, effort, and money. And one will find that some of these activities give some great joy, some lesser joy. It helps prioritizing what really gives us comfort. One learns a lot by being open to feedback. So if we talk to 10, 15 people we know and ask them to describe ourselves, often it is quite revealing what people have to say about us. And this helps us bridge the gap between our own self-image and the perception. And sometimes people tell us things about ourselves which we don't realize. Mingling with positive people is always hugely inspirational. Finding new people to converse with is extremely important because we all tend to live in islands, meet the same set of people, talk about the same things. But the more new people we converse with, it opens up our horizons and gives us new ideas. Optimizing time and energy to pursue one's interests is extremely useful, whatever one's interests are. Equally important to recognize larger issues worth solving and injustices worth correcting for each of us. These answers would be different for each of us, but if you're able to recognize this, I think we'll be able to bring clarity about our own purpose and core values. And finally, it's important at all stages in life to sit back and think about and discover what one loves doing. My submission is if one does this exercise, one will find comfort in purpose and core values. Does this work for all? And now we are in these debates about efficacy and all that. I found that this works for more than 90% of people, more than 80% of the time. So it's a worthwhile exercise doing with oneself. So we spoke about finding comfort and building clarity in purpose and values, which brings us to the next circle, which is about building credibility. Building credibility is both about attitude and skills. We will speak about attitude, and this is a lovely article I read in the Harvard Business Review about the kind of attitude that leaders need to have. So it says start by telling the truth, ask for help, go outside your comfort zone, admit mistakes and apologize, and engage others in your self-improvement journey. This is a chart I look at very often and try to follow this. Not always easy, but if one tries, it is possible. And let me share what happened with this talk. So when Mr. Sudhakar Rao reached out to me, at that time I had some thoughts about public image, public relations, and I said I would like to speak about it. But this is not a topic I'd ever spoken about, and I don't claim to be an expert in it. So I had to go outside my own comfort zone to put together and structure these discussions. And what did I do? I asked for help. I approached many people. Among them was Ambi Parmeshwaran, who's a management consultant, author, and coach. He's spoken as part of this series when he launched his latest book, Spring. I spoke to a dear friend of mine, Sai Krishnan, who's a transformation consultant and coach. In fact, he pointed me to this slide. I also spoke to a good friend, Leo Fernandez, who's the founder, CEO of Talentees and a columnist with us. I spoke to a former colleague of mine, great friend, and he's the head of learning at Sundaram Finance, V. Narasimhan. I spoke to a few of my own colleagues to ask them what their thoughts are, whether this makes sense. I also spoke to a colleague and friend of mine, Aparajita, who's probably on this call, to help me structure the flow, design, and help me with the rehearsal and see if this makes sense. And then I spoke to Mr. Sudhakar Rao for his feedback on whether this makes sense to the audience. He had great inputs to give. So I used all these inputs and tried to create something which might be of use for everybody in the audience. So all these people were part of my self-improvement journey, and I'm extremely thankful for that. However, this presentation is mine. The thoughts are mine. And if this doesn't add value to people spending an hour of their time this evening, the mistake is mine, and apologies in advance. So we spoke about building credibility through attitude. Equally important is to build credibility through skills. And if you look at how the world has changed, one needs both breadth of knowledge and depth of knowledge. What was an I-shaped requirement many years ago, today is a comb-shaped, where one needs to have specialist skills as well as broad general knowledge. I think cricket is a good way to explain this slide. If you looked at cricket in the 70s and 80s, you had a wicket keeper whose job was to keep wickets. He was extremely good at it. He would grab all the edges, ensure that no bias is considered, and he was a specialist. Then it changed to a T-shaped. If people have watched Ian Healy keep wickets to the pace bowlers and to Shane Warne, he laid a great sense of the field. So he was able to give inputs to bowlers of where to bowl. He was able to give captain insights into how to place the field. So he became T-shaped. Next was Adam Gilchrist, who was not only a great wicketkeeper and had a sense of the field, he was also a brilliant batsman. So he was pie-shaped. But what really is required today is somebody like MSD, who is all of this, but he's also captain of the side. He's a great athlete, great strategist, amazing tactician, brilliant wicketkeeper, and a game-changing batsman. And this doesn't come easily. One needs to invest time to learn these skills, and this will hold people in good stead. From my own experience, I started my life with publishing in 1998. I was a specialist in sales and marketing. Then I moved to radio, where I used to run the business. So I had to have a sense of broad general knowledge in terms of how HR works, how admin works, how a balance sheet works. Then I moved to television, where uh, I used to run content for 15, 16 channels, and that was something I had not done before. So apart from sales and marketing, I also acquired knowledge of how content works. I took a sabbatical after that to learn digital marketing, which I had never done, and to travel and to meet people. And then I worked in a media agency, which taught me how money works, how investment works, how supply works, how demand works. So over a period of time, I've been able to evolve from being a single specialist to being reasonably good at multiple things and having a broad general knowledge. I started my career with Chennai. When I moved to radio, I stayed in Chennai because I didn't want too many changes. From publishing, I moved to radio, which was a new industry to me, and I didn't know anything about radio. I learned. When I moved to broadcasting, I moved cities as well. So this is two layers of discomfort. You're moving into a new industry, a new area of content which I had never done before, and new cities of Bangalore and Hyderabad I had never worked with.
Volume is fully.
That's the change when I moved to an agency. During my sabbatical, I traveled all over.
Volume is full, sir.
So I moved to a different country, a different industry, and a different culture. So these experiences have helped me scale up both breadth of knowledge and width of knowledge. So what we've discussed so far is that to build an image, one needs clarity of purpose and core values. And to build credibility, one needs attitudes and skills. One can seek clarity by asking the 7 central questions about comfort, and one can enhance credibility through style and substance. The next is, how do we communicate an image in public? If we build an image, how do we communicate that? My belief is that leadership responsibility is not a self-promotion, that building an image is a leadership responsibility, but it is and not a self-promotion campaign. To communicate one's own image effectively, one needs to be simple, because what we speak should be relatable, it should be digestible. One needs to be efficient in communication, value people's time, be transparent, and be real. And finally, one needs to be extremely clear about what one communicates, because if you're clear, it enables others to learn of each other. And it also inspires people. 3 small tips in terms of how one communicates a public image. I call this ACT. The first is to leverage the power of associations. All of us belong to companies, all of us belong to communities. We are members of this. How can we leverage this association to build our own image? Questions to ask is, what do I do in communities? How many clubs am I part of that does good work? Within my own company, how many people from other verticals do I interact with? How many projects am I part of that don't come natural to me? How am I able to collaborate with different facets within an organization? The second is to create own media. Today we have the power of social media. One can put out and communicate an effective image in the social media using all kinds of social media. LinkedIn works best for professionals, so does Facebook, so does Instagram, so does Twitter, and so on. But one needs to be extremely consistent here. Now, you can't write an article on LinkedIn saying it's important for leaders to be tolerant, and you can't spew venom on Facebook and be intolerant. So one needs to be true to oneself and communicate what is really real. The second aspect is one's own personal networks. All of us belong to multiple networks. There's so much to leverage from each of these networks. So many opportunities to go and meet external people, to speak in public forums. All these are really own media. But the most important thing is to earn endorsement. Like successful brands earn a following, successful brands earn trust. Successful individuals will become extremely successful when they have the ability to earn endorsement, and that comes only by touching lives with impact, by genuinely being concerned about people around us, by genuinely being involved in making them better at whatever they want to be better at. And this is not easy, because all of us want to do multiple things. This requires one to have the right priorities, and to get those priorities right, that in itself can be a complete presentation. So I will park those thoughts for now. So To summarize what we have spoken so far about building and communicating a public image, we said everything starts with purpose. One needs to have clarity in purpose. One needs to display credibility through ability, and one needs a consistency of character. Building an image is about purpose and ability. Communicating an image is about consistency of character. Extremely difficult to find one's own purpose. It's an always ongoing self-improvement journey, but experiencing the 7 questions or doing the 7 things as we laid out in Comfort helps a lot. It certainly has helped me. Ability is about style and substance. Style is the kind of attitude we want. Style is the kind of attitude we build and display. Substance is how do we enhance our own skills? How do we become comb-shaped? How do you find the time to invest and become better at skills? And finally, consistency of character, leveraging the power of associations, creating own media and touching lives with impact. But finally, my last slide really is, it all boils down to how would we be like to be remembered. Good friend of mine, Leo Fernandez, recently wrote an article in Business Line on Campus about this. And he wrote a good article about a difficult subject. He spoke about how COVID has impacted all of us, how so many friends, relatives, and colleagues, they are all lost during COVID. And he speaks about how celebration meetings, he calls them celebrations of a life well lived, also moved to Zoom, where people used to come and talk about people who are extremely dear. And he went through the number of things people had to say about the people who had passed away, and said, what really matters finally is how would we like to be remembered. And he says in the final analysis, what really counts is principles that we stood for, people we touched, the way we change the world, even in a small way, by pursuing a purpose truly bigger than ourselves. And these are the real legacies that will outlive us. I've added passion to this, and for creating a mnemonic, I call it 4P leading to L. So the final thought I would like to leave behind is the principles we believe in, the passion we display, the people whose lives we touch, the purpose we espouse. This is what will create a legacy that will live far beyond ourselves. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I think I've done reasonably fine on time. I got 28 minutes up, and so I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to listen to feedback and answer questions. I will try my best to answer them to the best of my ability.
That is amazing, Mr. Navaneeth. This is one of the most structured presentations that I've seen on the Wise Views interactive webinar series so far. It is a good fortune that you have very nicely provided the linkages between your own personal perceptions and drawing from the epics to personal anecdotal experiences to what you have drawn from your friends and connecting everything to the topic that we are discussing today. I think it's very easy to consume what you have said, at the same time leaving a profound impact of those people who have managed to follow everything. It is actually very, very easy to follow, and the impact is maximum. And I must thank you here itself, and we are going to have a lot of discussion, but let me offer my thanks and gratitude for doing this. Thank you once again. So what I will do is I will now request Professor Prasad to come in, and we will initiate the Q&A in a while. So let me introduce Professor Prasad. Is the Director of Academic Wing at ICFAI Group. He architected and designed the online MBA program, which we launched recently. He is the professor and course mentor for the online MBA program. He has a rich experience of 3 decades, both at corporate as well as in academics. He's an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Calcutta. He has been spearheading this exercise of webinars right from day one, and he has put together a variety of questions and clustered into points of interest for us so that it is easier for us to take it up. Now I invite Professor Prasad to start the moderation. Professor Prasad.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sudhakar Rao. And that was a great presentation, Mr. Navaneeth.
Thank you.
I think, it has been structured and laid out for people to follow and execute on. What we have tried to do is that we have had a good number of questions, and the topic being on public image, we have tried to put it into different phases, and some of them Professor Sudhakar will ask, and some I'll come back on.
Sure.
So let me start with a broader picture. India looks at public image in a certain way because of its own tradition, and things have changed. There is a growing importance for public image today, and we see that highly activated and executed in different spheres of life. And as a leading person in the West said, if you don't do anything about it, others will make their own inferences, and that can damage you far more than your silence.
Right.
So in that sense, what are the changes in the environment which has increased the relevance of public image over the years in the Indian milieu? This is the first question.
I will try to answer this, but my first response in terms of what that quote was is, I always look at. In fact, I had this quote in my room for a very long time. Is that if you don't put a high value on yourself, don't expect the world to raise it for you. Extremely good advice for people attending interviews and negotiating salary. So that apart, see, I think what's really changed is we used to live by and large in a linear world when you were in control of the narrative. You were in control of the narrative. There were good actors, there were bad actors, there were shady actors, and that hasn't changed in the world. But you get caught out now because everybody has a point of view, and rightly so, and everybody is able to communicate that point of view. I wouldn't even say how do you correct it. That is crisis management, and let's assume, for instance, what people are saying is true. You have no control over it if you don't get it right. So it goes back to purpose. So as brands, as institutions, as custodians of the businesses we run, and our own roles as individuals, if we are driven by purpose, it is our job to communicate it because it's a good thing to do. It is not shooting from the rooftops. If we believe our business makes a difference, and we need to be empowered to scale our businesses so that we can make difference at scale. One needs to communicate that and grow our businesses. Now let's say all of us believe in charity, right? I mean, many of us believe in charity, and we want to do public good. Now let's say I want to give away 10% of what I earn to a good cause. Maybe advertised, may not be advertised, doesn't matter. But 10% of what I can give away is 10 lakhs. But 10% of what Warren Buffett gives away can solve a global problem. Which is why I believe purpose and profits are not disparate concepts. They're similar concepts because we should run our businesses well. We should make enough profits so that you can plow them back into what we believe is for the greater good. As individuals, we create change, but as part of larger entities, if our goals are aligned, we can really create difference at scale. That's all
Sure. Thank you. I think this point about the world not being so linear now.
Yeah.
And that there's so many people who are there to ever ready to give you feedback.
Yeah.
In more ways than one is something that is relevant and has changed quite a bit. Yes. Thanks a lot. That's a good insight. The second question is, when we say public image, the question arises, is there a inner private image? I mean, these are all gathered from the questions that we have received. So, I'm trying to relate it to what you have already said.
Yeah.
So when we say public image, there is also something about an inner private image. Of course, there is a connect to what you've said in terms of character there.
Yeah.
The question is, can they converge? What are the issues involved in this? Normally, when you see this happening in the outside world, you often get a feeling that what is being said is not what is being done. So how do you look at this? What are the issues involved?
While there is a public image and a private image, where they converges, if we say private image is what I think of myself, public image is how I'm perceived. That's the difference. And if there's a stark difference there, there's a problem. But my definition of public image and private images, that I would never do anything in private that I'm not comfortable in doing in public. Outside of one's own extremely private parts of our lives, which you would never do in public. that apart, we should be comfortable in doing in public what we would do in private. We should be comfortable in talking we should be comfortable about talking about things in a room full of people about what we talk to our confidants or in smaller groups. That comfort needs to be there, and that is important to build ourselves, to build communities, to build our companies. I sort of missed the other part of the question. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. So the question was, what are the issues in this? Is it possible to integrate?
At an individual level, it's far easier, far more complex at organization levels, and depends on the kind of organizations you are. So if you look at ourselves, no man is an island, right? We all belong to some entity. You belong to a family, you belong to a society, you belong to a company, you belong to a city, you belong to a state, etc., etc. So when when these come together, and often if individual purposes are not completely aligned, or are not a subset of a corporate purpose, there is a problem. Not that it will ever be 100% aligned. For instance, Khalil Gibran speaks beautifully about marriage. So he says, marriage is between a husband and wife where each retains their identity, but the waters of the sea, which is essentially a metaphor for love, binds them together. And he concludes his poem saying, you and I are like the strings of a lute. We beat to our own frequency, but create music together. So if you're able to find that commonality, it's perfectly fine. And the role of leadership is really to find that element of what binds us together. And forget institutes. Look at organizations that believe in doing greater good. So if your commentary as an organization is very different from the commentary of individual members representing you, there is an issue. So quite complex, but if the purpose is clear, the purpose is demonstrable, and if there's an understanding that as an organization, as individuals, we will not do anything that is questionable as far as this is concerned, you're fine. And I think some of these answers were Mr. Harish Bhatt beautifully explained this in a different context when he spoke last week.
Thank you.
And Professor Prasad and Mr. Sudhakar Rao, I'm here to learn. So if you have any inputs on these questions and everybody can benefit, please answer them as well. I know a little, I don't know everything, and I'm the first to admit it.
I think to build up on what you've said,
yeah.
I see a lot of commonality between the fundamental thing that you started with, which is character. And I think one of the first things that, you at the institutional level, when it becomes a bit more complex, finding the commonality has to come from the character side. I mean, there is a culture that the organization has, which has values.
Right.
And either you need to know that and understand that first, to some extent, at least to the core parts, or you will very quickly understand it. So if there is something which is there in common on which you can contribute, I think that's the space where it works. So
right.
That's one thing. And I think it's the job of leaders,
right,
to see that people's strengths are identified, and to see that communication takes place, and the way in which the thing is organized, as well as how people are involved. It comes out of where they're strong at. By targeting what they're not so strong at, it may not work. So this is one thing which came to my mind. The other thing when you were speaking is the tombstone test that is very, very famously described Steve Jobs and John Scully.
Yeah.
So that was also there, what do you want to be remembered as? So I think, that's the other thing which needs to be looked at quite frequently. Quite frequently, I mean, maybe, every year is also a good time to see whether you've actually been on that particular journey. Of course, you can be very flexible about it. But then the direction is there, the values are there, and the directions are there. So to that extent, how an organization is able to do this, how this can fit into what leadership does, what the culture does, how it is organized. This is where there's quite a bit of complexity, and I think there's quite a bit of job that leaders need to do there.
Correct. Agree completely. And I think once a year is perfect to do it. I do this for myself on my birthday every year.
So thanks for the input. I think that was, something which is enriched the conversation as it has gone along. Now I'll come to something a bit more practical, and that is that there have been quite a number of questions about confidence and communication skills, which is a very key element in this whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's a big issue. It's a big concern to many in the audience. And today the variety of media and the types of communications have also increased. And perhaps those who are good in traditional ways, they need to do a bit of learning when they have to come to the new age techniques. Now, how important are these for public image? And how do you build on it for different personalities and professions? Fairly broad, but I think, it's a good question.
So I think extremely important, right? So now, for instance, if you have something to say, you need to be able to communicate it.
Yes.
And there are different ways of communicating it. And all of us have gone through this, right? I remember during the time I started my career, I got a Gmail account after I started my career. So Gmail is younger than my own career. And the few things we could do those times were to speak in public. The only way you got noticed or were able to communicate your ideas of public speaking. And public speaking was hugely problematic. The fear of speaking in public, and all of us have gone through that. So I find one of the ways to do it is go out there and do it. All of us fail, and the younger people who are watching us, we weren't born this way. If today we have confidence, it's because we have some experience to fall back on. We have learned it the hard way. None of us is gifted. So if you recognize that communication is important, you need to build it. But today the challenge is even more, right? Now, you need to be reasonably good at spoken communication. You need to be reasonably good at pithy, concise, 160 character communication. So what really helps is, like, while I said build your own networks on social media, I find social media very distracting. I find Facebook extremely distracting for my own. I don't try to build, and my team complains I don't do anything on LinkedIn, and some of them are here. I don't write on LinkedIn. Not right. I think I should be writing a lot more. But I use this to follow leaders. I use this to follow people who do this very well. There are a lot of people whose written communication is extremely clear, extremely crisp, very purpose driven. So you follow by observation. What also really helps is friends help. Your friend circles help, and it's good to have mentors. And my general sense over 22 years of working is you are never denied help if you ask for it. Often we think we don't get help because we don't ask for it. So practicing writing, presentation skills, public speaking in smaller groups will absolutely help. And these are skills that can be built. All it needs is confidence, but skills don't come from confidence. Confidence comes from repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse. And it's perfectly fine to fail. It's perfectly fine to fail. And I remember recently when I had a presentation, and it was on a slightly philosophical subject. So when I shared with somebody, they said, "Can you add some humor to it?" So I said, "No, I can't add humor to this, but I don't want my presentation to be a joke. So I'll try and make sure that it makes sense." So no easy answers to this, except to say that it's not difficult. And often we look up to people and think we should be as good as they are on day one. But the fact probably is each of the people in this group is far, far better than what I was on day zero. So they'll be far better than all of us are.
Great. I think there are 3 points which have come out. One is go out there and practice it, do it. I'm remembered of the NLP key principles. What somebody else can do it, you can also do it, right, kind of thing. Then seek help and support, and the other is follow others to know what they're doing so that you can also practice.
Right.
So those are, I think, very, very practical points. With this, I know this cluster comes to an end. I'll hand it over to Professor Sudhakar Rao for the next cluster.
Thank you. I've been listening to Mr. Navaneeth quite keenly. two things that come out very, very clearly. One is I need to appreciate your intellectual honesty in your responses. That is amazing. And the second thing is that the call for leadership, wherever there is a dissonance between the personal image and the public image, especially in relation to the organization, I think it's a very, very big function of the leadership. Sometimes the leaders don't accept that you should have a personal image, which is also not totally correct. And on the other hand, good leaders will help it dovetail or align it with the organization's desired public image. I think that's where the leadership's test have failed sometimes and succeeded sometimes. That's a very, very good point of discussion that has come up. But I believe that character is something, in simple language, is something that you do when nobody is watching you. That is what you do on your phone when nobody is there to watch you.
Yeah.
I think that is basically character. And then everything else will fall in place or emanate from that behavior. And then the integrity, how well you connect it with what you would like to achieve, basically the purpose. So great frameworks and great learnings as we move forward. And now I focus on a different cluster of questions with your permission.
Sure, please.
This question looks like a kind of a prodding kind of question. It's you have answered it, but then assuming that one has not planned for a public image, how does one go about it? How does one go about in terms of positioning and public image, and how does one set goals?
One doesn't, the question of whether we plan or not plan for a public image doesn't arise. If we lead our lives that impact the public, if we lead lives that involve interaction with the public, if we work in organizations which are public facing, we don't have a choice. The question is, how much of myself do I want to put out in public is the question. That different people have can have different approaches. Which is why I say there's often a misnomer between public image and public image is not self-boasting. Public image is not about shouting from the rooftops. Public image is important because it's good to have at least know what public thinks about us, right? And it certainly it certainly amplifies efforts you put in for greater results. And look at every facet of our life. To be picked on a team inside the office, to be considered for promotions, to be part of an industry body. When you apply for a job, people do reference checks, and all this is in the realm of public image. It's not that you have one Fortune 500 company MD, and that's not just it. All of us have a public image. We cannot do with it. Some of us work on amplifying it, some of us don't. But the fact is, if we lead a life which is not in an island, which is a life in a society, which is a life in an organization, life in a community, it does matter what our perception is. And it's very similar to brands. So you're taking brand marketing and brand perception, lowering it down a notch, and then applying it to yourself. But if you really plan for it, it goes back to your purpose. It goes back to your ability. If you get those two right, others will communicate for you. You will earn endorsement, you will earn amplification, and you're okay not communicating it. But if your purpose is not clear, if your abilities are suspect, trying to amplify an image which is hollow will backfire. It is like we say, right? Good marketing kills a bad product faster. Same applies to public image.
Great and interesting too. So the public image of individuals, that is the personal brand, so to say, and the public image of the organizations, which is the larger entity. Most of us work for organizations. As you rightly said, we are not islands. So right. Either in the case of individual or in the case of the organizations, we will have to try and make efforts to build the public image. So our own efforts are basically efforts. In English, it is called positioning or desired positioning. But public image is the result of what you try to do. Or if you're lucky, it coincides with what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, no, so you're absolutely lucky if it coincides.
Yes.
So for instance, while while all of us are defined by the work we do, work doesn't define us, in my view. So work, to my mind, for a very long time or forever has been a means to an end. The end is what you would like to do, what gives you joy, what gives you happiness, uh, what fulfills your sense of purpose. That's an end. Work often is a means to an end, and which is fine so long as it's not great. It's not in great dissonance. If there's some sense of, but you find ways to service and do justice to that purpose. But imagine they're completely aligned. And I go back to what Harish Bhatt spoke last time. He says, I wouldn't think of life outside of Tata's or think of the organization I work for. No, I believe my purpose around the area of greater good, and that greater good is for solving inequalities. Inequalities, especially in access to infrastructure, access to health, access to education, access to equality. And that's what the organization tries to do, right? That's what we as a brand represent. We want to solve for inequality, and we want to solve for inequality at scale. If those are aligned, you're in a brilliant place. But if they're completely disaligned, you're in the wrong place. But often the dice that life throws you at, you will see alignment on a 3-on-5 or 4-on-7, 3-on-7. But if you ever find a place where that alignment is absolutely there, stick there for life. And life is absolutely joyous.
Fantastic.
Happens.
Fantastic. You're drawn good parallels between what Mr. Harish Bhatt has said and with the current context of discussion. Thank you very much for that. This brings us to the next question in this cluster. Towards building this public image, assume it is for an organization, what kind of resources that one should invest in?
See, as far as organizational public building frameworks are concerned, so typically the model people follow is a model called POEM, POEM, which is paid, owned, and earned media. Paid media is where you spend money to build your image, which is largely advertising. Owned media is your own social handles, your own websites, what you're doing, because those are things you own. And earned media really is what others tell about you. What does it translate in terms of reach, both on online and offline media? Earned media works when people really are impacted by what you do. And earned media often, in many cases, earned media doesn't link back to the business you do, but it links back to the purpose you espouse. So, for instance, I might be in the business of selling soaps, and my paid media may be to promote that soaps. I might do something on owned media, but my earned media could come from reducing plastic footprint in the world. So, which could be fundamental to my purpose of making the world a better place. But I happen to be in the business of selling soaps. So, a good framework for building a public image from an organizational point of view is paid, owned, and earned. I think owned media has become extremely critical in the last decade or so. Almost didn't exist. I would say almost didn't exist pre-2003, 2002. Outside of email and CRM, you didn't have that, and that was scalable to a limited extent. So resource investment of money comes from paid media. Investment of effort and energy, which doesn't cost too much money, comes from earned media. Investment in staying true to your purpose and making an impact is what will result in earned media. Earned media is permanent. Paid media is transient. So I spend $1,000 today, get $2,000 in sales. Tomorrow I turn off the tap, it will go down. So while that is important, owned media and earned media become extremely important. And we sort of applied the same principles for personal branding. So I didn't talk about paid media there, but personal branding is about owned media and earned media. Power of networks and power of your own social media is owned. The lives you touch and the endorsement you receive is earned. Same thing applies to companies as well. So investment depends on the scale of your business, the size of your business, and what the business ambition is. But you will get earned media only if you have the right intent. So paid media needs investment, earned media requires intent.
Great. Very, very interesting. I'm very thankful for giving this poem.
Yeah.
Paid media, owned media, and earned media. From there on, we move to the next question. Digital media seems to be playing a very, very important role these days in building the public image. What are the important digital resources and how does one plan effectively?
See, what's really changes the media landscape, right? I mean, both in terms of share of attention and share of time, digital media has become important. But the underlying principles of marketing that I was taught when I was in B school and what I assume is taught today remains the same. So digital is a channel, but it's a different animal. So like traditional, the rules or the do's and don'ts of traditional media are very different from multimedia. They're extremely different in digital marketing. So the strategic intent remains the same. The tactics are a little more complex. They're more complex because we all collectively have taken time to figure out that media, and users seem to be better than we are. So the discourse on digital media is being dictated by users and not by practitioners. That gap will close, but essentially strategies remain the same, tactics vary.
Right. So strategies will remain the same, but tactics would vary, given the fact that there's a lot of action on digital media. And it's a function of time as well, that one would invest in trying to understand that media.
Right.
Great. I would like to take a moment here and reflect on the Hindu. The Hindu as a newspaper, I have personally been reading from my second standard. Although I didn't understand anything, my father made me sit down and read loud while he was having breakfast or lunch or dinner. And I used to read loud and he used to correct the way I spoke about certain words. For example, Kadapa was pronounced as Kudappa because I didn't know what was Kudappa and what was Kadapa at that time. And I kept on reading and it has become what is called newspaperhood. So I have literally grown on reading the Hindu as a newspaper. And I have learned quite a bit in terms of news, in terms of perspectives, in terms of social happenings, political happenings, literature, art, so on and so forth. So my image or the impression in my mind about the Hindu is that it's a very authentic newspaper and it's a giant in print. Today, the media world is changing. So is Hindu trying to diversify its image vis-a-vis the latest or the new age images that one desires to have? How would you look at this?
So I don't think there's a need for us to reinvent the image, because if you look at what the image is, and you described it beautifully, it's one of authentic, it's one of credibility, it's one of the ability to question those in power, hold those in power accountable for what we believe is greater good. And we believe greater good is about creating a vibrant, secular, equal society. And we should empower people who can solve problems, partner with them to solve for problems of equality. That doesn't change. Whether you're in the Stone Age or the digital age, that doesn't change. And that's a legacy I've inherited. You've done justice to that over 140 to 43 years. And it's brilliant. It's relevant to this day. Like when I talk about my grandfather in 85, what he did in 85 is relevant today also. But yeah, but how do you engage with audiences beyond a printed product? How do you engage them through digital media? How do you engage them? How do you engage people with stories that go beyond the printed word? How do you tell compelling stories in audio format? How do you tell compelling stories in a video format with data? That the Hindu has done well. So we are done quite well in our journey of digital transition. Today, We get lots of audiences on our digital. We also believe to build this business, one needs to charge for good quality content. The challenge for organizations such as ours is from a good for democracy point of view, content should be accessible. But for scale to do justice to this purpose, you need to generate money. So we have metered paywalls on all our sites. So certain articles are free, certain articles are paid for. People see value in our digital products, and we are making good progress there. So while our values are traditional, our outlook is quite modern. So the way we engage with the outside world is modern. And I will share an incident with you, because you told me about how when you were growing up, what the Hindu meant to you. When I was growing, I grew up in a really small town. So at that time, I knew everybody in that town. Now when I go, it's grown and I don't know many people. And I was hugely inspired by my grandfather. And like I said, I always wanted to be a worthy grandson to him. My father's also a doctor, and he lives my grandfather's life. So when I was growing up and I was in my 7th, 8th, or 9th, all of us think, right, what do you want to become? So first I thought I should play cricket, and I dismissed that idea very quickly. I said, whatever I do, I should get respect in society. That was important for me at that time. And there was one gentleman in my town who was hugely respected. My father was respected because he's a doctor, and this person was hugely respected. He was the distributor for Hindustan Lever Limited. HUL those days was called HLL, which was Hindustan Lever Limited. He also was a good man, a charitable man. He was highly respected. My father was highly respected. But both of them respected the Hindu. So I thought, when I grow up, I will either work for the Hindu or I will work for HLL. But I wasn't too interested in the logistics side of the FMCG business. So today I know I have labels to what my thinking was as a kid. I was fascinated by supply and demand. So I always was, okay, this sales guy comes, these lorries come, and supply is there. But why do consumers go to a shop and ask for a product? So who creates this demand? Which is where I got interested in marketing communications. And that's the reason I went to MICA. And I said, I'll either work for the Hindu or I'll work for HLL after MICA. And I had the good fortune of working for the Hindu, and be the huge privilege of coming back to the organization. So extremely proud of this organization. And when people like you talk about our brand, it just reminds us the privilege we have and the efforts we must make sure to enhance the stature of this organization. So thank you very much for that.
Amazing journey that you have had with respect to your purpose and objectives, and how you very carefully crafted your career with an objective of actually getting into either the Hindu or the HUL. Amazing. Thank you very much. And now I hand it over back to Professor Prasad for the next cluster of questions. Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Professor Sudhakar Rao. These are, this cluster is essentially on the practicalities. And I think this is basically about, strategies, specific strategies that we can use. So here is the first one. What strategies are to be adopted by various stakeholders to build a consistent and rewarding public image? It's a very general question, but if we can have the response with respect to some cases or some principles which can be used beyond the framework that you have laid out, that would be very interesting.
I think to be aligned with what the purpose is, and to seek common understanding and common alignment of that. And a good example is Apple. Look at, if you look at what Apple really believed in, it was to make life simple through design. That's what it is. The iPhone, the iPad, everything is a byproduct of it. But deep in their philosophy, and if you look at the way the interface is, the way it is designed, the way it's structured, is use of design to simplify user experience. Now, if everybody believes in that, then everybody thinks about it. You hire people who have that kind of thinking, it falls in place. So it starts with strong articulation of that. If that is weak, it is problematic. It's very difficult to repair this on the go. And it's similar of us, right? If we are very clear about what we believe in, and we have strong do's and don'ts in our life, and look at the kind of people we attract in our own circles. Look at our circle of friends, and they're very similar. They tell something about us. And companies are similar, except they're larger. In your circle of friends, you are more in control. When you start your career, you're not in control. So get to the right place and then build your influence there.
That's I think the takeaway that I'm getting from that is that as a leader, when we talk about strategy, there is a leader involved, and there is a need to articulate what you want very clearly and repeatedly in different ways.
Yes.
And then that has to get embedded in how people look at it. And there will be people who will buy in, there'll be people who won't buy in. And those whom you hire, you need to look at people who are likely to look at it in similar ways in terms of values. Maybe the way they approach it is actually do is different, execute it is different, but at least in terms of values, this is what I understand as what you are suggesting.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you. You have the good thing is, which is why I said please add to what I'm saying. Your ability to connect the dots and crystallize what others try to say on areas they're not too familiar with is phenomenal. So we should have, if we had done this session earlier, then my answers would have been sharper. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that reiterates a belief that I also hold. So I think there is that. Thank you for that. The second is, do you think things like the differing nature of the profession, the sector in which you work, whether it's a startup or an established things, because the dynamics like money, investment, they are all different. The values which each profession brings are different. Do you think that the approach to how you build a public image is different? Are there any nuances in this which you would like to bring about?
It would be different in terms of the paid media, and also very often it's like with our own lives right now. If we look at each of us and say what is my own purpose in life, these are extremely difficult questions to answer with any degree of sharpness. And like I said, I do this on my birthday, and I've done that for multiple years. While the broad spectrum of that has remained unchanged. So let's say if I look at the map and say Chennai, it's always been in Chennai. But 1 year it's Anna Nagar, next year it's moved a little to Besant Nagar, third year somewhere else. So it is a moving piece. It's very difficult to get it absolutely right, but directionally it's all in the same. So similarly in new companies and startups, as you acquire a lot of people, these are slightly moving pieces. Easy to get the broad contours of it right, but getting it absolutely sharp is a work in progress. But in terms of approach and investment, investment is a function of the size and scale of the business and what you have. But intent is there from day one. Except it may take time to build longer, but it will stay forever.
Thank you. I'm also recollecting what you said about how you chose your profession, then how you chose the sector that you got into, and I mean all these also seem to be connecting to what the question is. So it's interwoven with the strategy as well as how one's personal journey is.
Yeah, and it's nice if it works out. Otherwise,
yes,
sometimes it does. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't, but doesn't matter.
But I want to just come in here with your permission. See, in case of an academician, the way we try and build our public image is through certain efforts, which begin with personally shedding the shyness. A lot of academics are shy. They think that they have no business to build their public image. From the days of your deep-pocketed tata to the days of current teacher, everyone thinks that they don't have to put any additional efforts. But the way you have connected the story is that a teacher is a giver. A teacher is an institution. Likewise, a doctor is a giver, is an institution. So the orientation is totally to give. And if that giving is consistent, and then there are stories around it, and there are experiences around it, then they are in contact with public. Therefore, the stories would propagate. You have so many more people to be in touch with. unlike professions which are different from teaching and healthcare. So academician or a teacher who is in touch with students day in and day out has got so many anecdotes and stories to actually talk about on LinkedIn. If you are a very carefully cultivated or invested in kind of an academician, you would talk about your interactions with the teachers. Suddenly, a student has asked you in the classroom, "Sir, can we make a jacket out of ozone layer and go and see the sun and come back?" It's a sensible question. But then if you highlight that in your LinkedIn profile and say that today one brilliant student asked me this question, then several thought-provoking responses would come. It will not only motivate the followers, namely his students, it will also motivate the fellow teachers and all, and slowly the public image will build. So the opportunity to take some effort in this direction is much more for teachers and doctors than anyone else, especially they are actually meeting public quite often. And
no, absolutely, absolutely. And see, my own view on this is clearly they're professions of givers. But what is one's fulfillment in a profession of giving? You should have seekers, right? So the more they seek, the more I will give. And public image is a way of getting more seekers, and it only helps a giver give more. So there's absolutely no contradiction in a giver building a public image.
Great. I think I'll connect that to the third question. See, in the world of, I mean, this question is
Are we
about.
okay on time? We are at 7:45. Is that fine? So
I'm blissfully ignoring the time.
So if that's okay with you, we'll take it on.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
So this question is about criticism and how it is handled when you get into the public image and the world of that. And I'm connecting it to the world of academics and what Professor Sudhakar Rao has said. In my journey, what I have found is that there's a lot of emphasis on the forefront of knowledge in terms of the incentives given to teachers and what the world thinks. So normally what teachers tend to project, and particularly in higher education, is because the regulator wants it that way, the country wants it that way, you want to be in the top 100 universities, you have to publish, there's a framework there. So the entire focus gets shifted to research and knowledge generation, if you may call it in simple terms. Right. While the emotions and the real power, the social purpose of education lies in where you're learning, the student is learning, which is the communication aspect of it. So because the incentives, as I call it, structure in higher education is to encourage people to do more and more of that, so that get a better rank as a university, as a better rank as a faculty member. The entire community gets is focused on that, and can't help it. I mean, that's how that is. Now, therefore, the focus on learning to that extent, because everyone has the same 24 hours. So the focus on learning, the stories about learning, because the teacher's profession is actually a development professional. Your job is to inspire and develop. And so the attention on that, and which serves the purpose of a great public image. We all know the teachers that we had because they were inspiring. I mean, we remember them because they were inspiring, not necessarily because they published research. I mean, when I come to the bottom line of the teacher, it comes from that. So here, there are two schools of thought. And the moment, you discuss this, I'm now connecting into the question that, there is criticism. There will be criticism because there is a purpose here. There are institutional values and there are institutional purposes here. How do you handle criticism with respect to the public image? How does one deal with criticism and detractors?
So first is I come from a family of teachers. So my maternal grandfather was a teacher. My mother's a teacher. I have two sisters. Both of them are teachers. They're not professors, but they're all teachers. So massive respect for teachers, and I completely understand where you're coming from, what you're saying. First is criticism is part and parcel of life, right? I mean, you can't make everybody happy with everything we do. So long as we believe what we are doing is right, and fundamentally it doesn't go against the mores of established norms, it's fine. And think about, so I have, right behind me are 23 people who inspire me a lot. So there are 23 personalities I have chosen to inspire me, and I talk to them often, especially during COVID when office floor is usually empty. They're the only people I speak with. All of them were criticized. So you have got Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who was one of the greatest people in my view, and he was criticized. So that shouldn't bother us so long as we're able to do what we believe in and it's making a difference to people. And all of us are open to criticism even in our professions. So I always say, while a leader's job is not always to be popular, because by being popular you do nothing. You can't win everybody over. We don't run our businesses. We don't service what we believe in by intent to being popular. We do that by attracting people who believe in that, and not everybody will be attracted. That's the rule of the world. That is fine. But our jobs are to be fair and firm and transparent. And if we believe we are doing that, and most of the world sees it that way, it's fine. And not everything we believe in will come out of the job. Which is why I said sometimes these are means to an end, sometimes it's an end in itself. If you meet the sweet spot, you're extremely lucky. So I thought I would like to leave with everybody is to also do this exercise about what is important to me in my own life. What are my priorities? So I do this once a year for myself. So I jot down the 8 or 10 relationships that are important to me. So relationship as a son is important, as a parent is important, as a husband is important, as a friend, as a colleague, as a person of a company. So typically, as a member of community, we'll have 8, 9, or 10 relationships that really matter. Each of them you could code on a scale of 1 to 10. Typically, when you start this exercise, everything will be on 9, which is a wrong way to start. Because if you have 10 priorities and all are equal, you will never be able to do justice to that. So one should have a limited number of priorities, and one should be able to rank those priorities in some kind of order. The second I try and do, and I don't try and do, I do this for myself, is what is my satisfaction with each of these relationships. So let's say there are 10 things that are important to me. Relationship 1 to relationship 10. So on a sheet of paper, I draw 10 circles. Circle 1 is 1 centimeter diameter radius, circle 2 is 2, and so on. And then I plot my satisfaction with each of these relationships. So let's say, how do I think I was done as a parent? So it could be 9. How have I done as a son? 6. As a brother? 7. As a friend, etc., etc. Then I hand draw these lines. I hand draw a curve which connects these lines. And to me, that is the circle of my life. These are the 10 things I believe in. And this is how satisfied I am. And if my life is moving on this circle, and if that curve is not a circle, my life is broken. Imagine that is like on a journey, I'm encountering speed breakers everywhere. And on something that is extremely important to me, if I score extremely little, and if I add an element of frequency in that chart, then you realize that it's extremely broken. So then you are not at peace with yourself. You believe in something, you're doing something else simply because either the priorities are wrong or the ability to do justice to those priorities are wrong. And this doesn't come easily. This comes from being honest with oneself and doing this with some amount of rigor. Ideally, you will have priorities, not more than 8 priorities, which have clearly ranked. You will be at 8 or 9 in terms of satisfaction on each of those priorities. Importance 4, you are 8. Importance 9, you are 8. So your life is a perfect circle. As you move along, the aim becomes, can I get to 10 on each of these? So if you want to get to 10 on each of these, you need to deprioritize something, because you can't get 10 on 10 on 10 priorities. You may be able to get a 10 on 10 on 8 priorities. So it is a battle between setting the right priorities and getting those priorities right. Extremely useful exercise to do. Again, an exercise I do with myself. I do this on my birthday. Normally, I don't believe in New Year resolutions. I believe in having a party on December 31st and waking up late on 1st. That's my belief, not that it should apply to anybody else. But I realize all of us on our birthdays are so busy answering wishes that we don't spend time with ourselves. So the 2 things I do on my birthday is look at my own purpose and try to record it in some form, and do my own circle of life. And I've done this for 15 years. And I was introduced to this concept in 2005 in a workshop. I've added, that was just satisfaction. I've added priority and satisfaction and added frequency and developed it for myself. When I look at my own, it's all in a book, and now I'm able to do it on Excel. You do a bar chart and you do a radar chart and you get it. When I look at that 15 years, it tells me how my priorities have changed in life. So for instance, when I was 35, 36, parents for me were not a 9 or 10. Now when I'm 45 plus, they're a clear 10, because I realize, touchwood, God willing, I have many more years of my life with them, but may not. So you will see that shifting. You will see some things which we believed are so important. I used to believe work is everything in life, but work for me has come from a 10 to 7. Now it might go back to a 9, because the place I work for is extremely aligned with what I believe in. So in this case, it could be a 9 or 10, but in some other cases, it wasn't. If we do that, I think we will be able to answer for, and these are essentially questions we need to answer for ourselves, right? And these are extremely difficult. We don't have the luxury of sitting in the Himalayas and meditating it, and we don't have. We lead normal lives. We need to make a living. We have our own aspirations. We have image. We want to succeed. And we want to do this also. That comes with tapasya of a different kind, which one needs to do with oneself. I have found these two exercises extremely useful. I would urge everybody to try and do it. My only regret is that I didn't start earlier in life, because I didn't know about this. I found both these constructs extremely useful, extremely revealing. And I'm far more at peace with myself than I was 15 years ago. And to my mind, only that matters. Nothing else matters. I should be happy. I should be at peace with myself. And you're at peace with yourself if you think you're doing what you believe in. But like I said, it takes some kind of tapasya of a different kind. But I found investing in that useful to me. I don't have research-based answers to this, but I can speak from my own experience, which, like I say, efficacy is, it works 80% of the time for 80% of people, so which is good efficacy.
I think it indeed connects with what we have been hearing from our ancients also. I mean, I think the tapasya component is what you do within yourself, not necessarily what you do sitting in the Himalayas. So the war is within yourself. So if the tapasya is within yourself, I think the job is done.
Correct.
The other interesting thing is that, I found it connecting to what one of our entrepreneur speakers mentioned in our third webinar about self-awareness. Self-awareness being a lot of self-awareness needed if you want to look at careers. I think, it was also the director of IIM Kozhikode who reiterated that. So, a lot of your career planning and what you do, if your self-awareness is in order, maybe the big rock is out there. So what you're saying reflects on that. So there is reflection involved, there's self-awareness, call it mindfulness. And if all that is there, then you realize where the circles are, which circles are big, and how you're doing on those circles. So the other C, which is criticism, it does, recede into the background.
But criticism is important also. So it's not to be dismissed. Something to listen to, but not necessarily to allow it to impact you.
Not get overwhelmed by.
Criticism should be like the camel outside the tent in the desert.
Yeah.
If you allow it to enter the tent, there's a problem. So I think we are almost at 8 o'clock. So with your permission.
Yeah, great. I think there are several things, and you are prompting us to also speak. That's why we have taken collectively.
No, brilliant. I learned from it. I was selfish in this because I want to learn lots more.
We too are equally selfish. Professor Prasad, would you have any other question before we wrap it up, or should I take one last question and then close it?
Well, I have a selfish question for the institution.
Okay.
And that is for the institution as well as for the students. And this is about, what are your suggestions for a higher education institution on this topic? And what is your suggestion to students beyond what the frameworks you've given?
Yeah. So I think see, I've always believed one of the issues with our education system, and I don't mean good or bad. and I have a view about this, that our systems are great at setting up people for success. We do a very bad job of allow, of teaching our students of handling failure. And nobody is a born success. All of us succeed and fail. I've been in room full of 500 people, and I said, if anybody in this audience has not failed in life, please put up your hand. The 20, 30 times I've asked this question, nobody's put up their hands. But generally, I find that all our educational institutes hardwire people for success and do a good job. But we don't do enough to allow people to deal with failure, and failure is part of life. So soft skills and some of these sessions, if they can be structured better, and it's very difficult to structure. I never spend more time on a half-an-hour presentation than I've done on this. Very, very difficult to. That I think is important, and for students, I never say I give advice, but I love teaching and I love interacting with students. I spend a lot of time with incubation centers. I love being with younger people because it reminds me of how better I could have been if I were as smart as they are today when I was their age, and I wasn't. And it's quite humbling to do that. My advice to them is every student should define what success means for themselves. Often when we are at the formative stage of our careers, we allow others to define success for us. Never let somebody else define what is success. Success isn't being CEO of a company. Success isn't necessarily being vice president by age 30. Success usually isn't about earning more than your friend. Your definition of success could be very different. Your definition of success could be the ability to help 6 people. Definition of success is to be surrounded by happiness. Definition of success is not to be sad. Whatever that definition, we should never allow somebody else to set what success means. We should have our own definition of success and live life to its fullest, and we'll achieve it. And success is what we define for ourselves. Success is not what others define for us. I wish somebody had given me this advice when I was young. I also chased lots of mirages in life before. I had to get over 40 and gray before this hit me. But I found people benefit from this. And it's very liberating for students.
Great. I think, this is very, 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 very new age, and it connects to people of this age group. And I also see that they have this kind of view about life far more than the earlier generations. So great. I think it connects very well, and it's a great response. You are one of our, younger speakers, and it is truly, in all humility, great respect for you, for what you've come out with, which is very, very practical on one side, as well as at a very high level in terms of the frameworks that people can follow. Thanks a lot, Mr. Navaneeth. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I hand it back to.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Mr. Navaneeth, it's been worth spending these 1.5 hours. The 90 minutes that we have spent till now is worth every minute listening to and actually reflecting on each and every aspect. Hats off to the cap that you tipped to ICFAI Group's mission, the character, ability, and the purpose. Thank you very much for that. And the circle of life exercise, which can be a workshop idea, which I'm also going to try, and we're also going to try in our classrooms. I'm sure many professors and teachers who are around will try in their own classrooms. It's a great idea and a suggestion. More importantly, it's not a theoretical suggestion. It is something which you have yourself practiced over several years. And therefore, there's a great deal of credibility attached to it, and very easy for us to start working on it without having any doubts to start with at the stage number 1. The other thing is, and a brilliant piece today, and it goes a long way, and we can take home this very important point which you mentioned. Life is a struggle between setting the priorities right and setting right priorities. On this note, on behalf of ICFAI Group, I thank you very much for delivering this very thoughtful, honest, and reflective piece of presentation today to our audience and to all of us. We are immensely grateful to you, Mr. Navaneeth, and I thank Mr. Vinay Kamath for suggesting your name and connecting me with you. It's been wonderful talking to you and going over your presentations and discussions over the last few days. And I also thank all the members of the audience who have patiently listened to the entire discussion and conversations. And several times we dipped in our own selfish interests in this and tried to learn and probably say something along with the speaker. You will have to pardon us, but that's what the discussion is all about. That's what a meaningful conversation is all about. Thank you very much, Mr. Navaneeth. We will request you to join us next week also, because Ms. Vinita Bali is going to speak on 23rd of July at
Certainly.
7 p.m.
Look forward.
We will share
Certainly.
the invitation to you and all the members who are logged in, and also the new members who are going to log in. See you all at 6:30 p.m. on July 23rd. Till then, stay safe. The COVID pandemic is not over. We have to take all the precautions. Have a good evening. Thank you all.